Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. My guest today is Dr. Richard Winters. Richard is a practicing emergency room physician. Excuse me, go back over that, please. Richard is a practicing emergency physician and an executive coach at the Mayo Clinic. He is also the director of leadership development for the Mayo Clinic Care Network, where he facilitates retreats and delivers programs that train leaders at healthcare organizations worldwide. Richard's authored the recently published Wall Street Journal bestselling book, You're the Leader, Now What? Leadership Lessons from Mayo Clinic. We've got Richard with us today as we discuss leadership and strategies to reduce burnout. Richard, welcome to the show. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. Hey, as we talk about this subject of leadership, let me just start out with, who are the best leaders in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. So I have an opportunity to coach leaders, right? And so each day as I'm meeting with individuals, there's different things that come out of each individual leader. That's like that is something that is very effective. And so coaching has been a really nice way of experiencing just different practices. I think the best leaders, and especially here at Mayo Clinic, are those individuals who are able to connect a mission and values with the way forward and what's happening right now. And so connecting patient stories with what we're doing and where we're wanting to go.
I'm going to hold that just for right now. And I want to come back and we can expound upon that a bit together.
Yeah.
But take me a little bit deeper. How about yourself personally? Who are the best leaders in your life?
Best leaders in my life are, I would have to say, my wife. Working alongside my wife at home.
Pretty cool.
So it's interesting. We met each other in medical school. We were medical students together.
Nice.
And she became a surgeon. I became the emergency physician. And then we had children, and my wife decided that she wanted to stay at home and take care of the kids. And so now she's, running the family and running me and making things helpful for me.
We need someone to run it, don't we?
We do. And definitely she's the bottom line there for that. For me, the best leaders, honestly, a lot of the stuff I get from is kind of virtually, honestly, individuals that I haven't necessarily met. And so through reading and through listening and hearing from people far away, like how they're approaching things, those are the individuals that I really learn the best from.
That's really good. I think, when we're growing up too, I think we find people, whether we recognize it or not, coming alongside us to influence and mold and shape and inspire, maybe even help us vision cast some things that we get to do in our lives. How about growing up, if you don't mind me just kind of prodding just a wee bit? Because I think people that reach the positions that you've reached and the things that you do and the passion, clearly, I read a lot about you and the things that you do and the things that you bring to your work. These are, the whole idea of giving forward. We've had people give to us in ways that have influenced and shaped and molded who we become. How about growing up? People that have just kind of stand out for you.
Yeah. So I am not the typical story, I think, for a physician. So in high school, I was a punk rock skateboard kid. And so I graduated from high school with a C-. Probably that's generous average. And so I was not, when I first told my parents in college that I was thinking of becoming a physician, there was some laughter, which was appropriate, that came out of them.
That's great.
Somewhere along, my grandmother got sick. She had Lou Gehrig's disease, and we took care of her at home. That started building this interest in medicine. I started actually working at a local hospital as an orderly and had some interactions there. And so in college, it just started, it turned on. And so the first individuals really were both chemistry teachers, ironically. And so one of them just it was really the first adult who took me in and I think recognized, at least from my own perspective, that there was some talent there and some interest and helping me to find find that in myself. And the second individual the same way. I mean, it's just these adults, and who would have thought that I would have befriended chemistry teachers, but really they had a huge impact on me. I think they were the first to really see me.
I love that phrase you're talking about. People that help us find something within ourselves. I think sometimes, when we're going through our lives, we're in our forest, we can't even see our own trees a lot of times. And what we get to have is people outside that might be, kind of our mentor, a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and they get to see some things in us that maybe we haven't discovered yet. And they begin to kind of identify and name and bring to our attention a side of us or a dimension of us, again, that maybe is not necessarily brand new, but when we kind of tap into it, we say, hey, maybe I've got some talents or skills or abilities in this area that I can begin to bring to a little greater awareness, maybe even to fruition in a way that can really contribute in some meaningful ways in life.
So true.
Yeah, I love that. So you're taking all these experiences and for those listening, Richard has been in a number of positions throughout his professional career, managing partner of a Democratic physician group, chair of the emergency medicine, president of an 800 physician medical staff, and CEO and founder of a managed care startup. Not to mention his involvement with executive coaching, adult development, medical education. So, in all of this experience, let's talk about what are you seeing makes for a good leader. You were intimating this as we began today, and I asked you to just hit the pause button. Let's go back and hit play. What makes for a good leader? Do you see, and why do we need good leaders?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a lot of, as we think about leadership, we tend to think about people with power who are kind of pointing from the balcony, telling us what
Exactly.
to do, right? And it's easy, I think. Also, I mean, I'm expecting that maybe some of the listeners are like, "Oh, physician," and as a physician, I go into a room, I talk to a patient, and then I write orders, and
Right.
there very much can be this perspective of the individual leader as the individual with power, formal, abilities to get things done. That is not where I think leaders are most effective or where they come from. And so my own story was, as I was finished residency in emergency medicine, and I'm working, taking care of patients one at a time on a shift, and starting to feel like there's some things that could be improved.
Mm.
And so how do you improve them? You're either complaining about them and pointing out that things are wrong, or you're going to become a part of how to fix them.
Yeah.
And so was fixing them then going and having meetings with individuals and then writing orders and telling them what to do? Or was it more trying to understand all these different perspectives of how to approach things and then coming together and collaborating on making things move forward? And that for me was like this turning point where I started participating in meetings and hearing the different voices of nurses and hospital administrators and patients and trying to put these things together. I started to see leaders who were able to bring these ideas together and start to move things forward. And so for me, that's where I think the idea of like being a really good leader started to occur. Like that's what that is. It's not just power. It's actually bringing different perspectives together. There was a voice of hospital leadership, which was finance and things like that, quite different from the voice of the bedside, taking care of the patient.
Yes.
So I went and got I did an MBA program, and then heard about, actually, one of the courses was around coaching.
Mm.
I'd heard about coaching, like Bobby Knight throwing chairs on the basketball
Right.
court. That's kind of a different kind of coaching, same word.
Right.
And also, or either that, or it was talking about your feelings, which as a physician taking care of emergency patients, it wasn't that, I wasn't really interested in having that sort of thing. But what I found was a course on how to think, and about how to think about how we think and how to help others think, and about how to help others find their effectiveness. And it just paired so well with this idea of what a great leader is I think someone who's able to meet with individuals one-to-one and help get the best out of them, to be able to meet with groups and facilitate large groups of individuals together. And then I think a really important part is being able to then look at yourself and see these parts of you that you may not think are the best, most effective, and some of the things that are limiting yourself, and then working through that. And so I think our best leaders are operating on those levels, really self, one-to-one, and as they're working with groups of individuals trying to improve things.
Yeah, I really like that. That encouragement for kind of a meta awareness, or that meta thinking, thinking about thinking, being on the
Yeah.
outside and being intentionally looking at that way. And I love that. I love that kind of that vision of being able to come alongside somebody, to be a part of something, to step into it, not so much from an authority, to those that are maybe subordinate, or whatever word we want to use, but kind of coming down and into, coming alongside, joining in, and being a part of. I think there's in many ways, there's in doing so and taking that position, there's the absence of judgment. There's the absence of kind of having to wear the authority. And in fact, there's probably more of an opportunity to find the answers from within and get people to recognize what you just said right there, encouraging them and prodding them gently, benevolently, to think about, hey, what are some ways that we can work through these things, but maybe facilitating that by being right alongside and at the same level of being involved in it.
Yeah, I think our best leaders really look at individuals as colleagues And it is
Yeah.
hard because as you go through this, you can talk about coach and client, you can talk about leader and direct report or employees, or,
Right.
it's all very hierarchical and formal. But I think our best
Yes.
leaders are looking at individuals as colleagues, and those are individuals at any age group. Some may be above or below in terms of formal leadership status,
Sure.
but they're looking at just humans who
Yeah.
each have their own experience, and how do we best move forward together?
Maybe in some ways this question is kind of is answers maybe kind of maybe inherently answers itself, but just answer for me. Why do you think we need good leaders? We need good leaders. Um, as you've worked in this field for so long, what is the importance of a good leader in an organization, in a group, a family, just that theme overall?
Yeah, it's let me just say, so one of the things I hear people commonly say is they're talking about meetings, like, oh, meetings, let's get rid of all the meetings. Okay. And so let's imagine that. Let's imagine we have no meetings. So how are we going to make decisions? Is it going to be individuals working in isolation alone, each having their own perspectives and kind of trying to push? And then that really becomes this position of power, and how do things work out in that way? And so there needs to be some way for us to get together and to be able to consider things together, and to be able to see the agreements and disagreements and the different points of view forward, and to move forward. And so, but how are we moving forward? And I think organizationally, that's you're talking about mission and values, and you're talking about the culture that you're building. And so, in a place like Mayo, and I'm sure, and for the listeners, anywhere they're working, there are missions and values and those sorts of things. And so, our best leaders are going to connect those values and that mission with all these different perspectives on how to best serve the people that they're serving, and identify ways to move forward. So I think you can be the leader who thinks of themselves as the boss of others. And certainly part of the job of the leader is allocation of resources, hiring and firing, and
Sure.
making sure things are going well. But I think a lot of times it's the leader is just kind of the keeper, the nurturer of the
Mm.
mission and values, and moving the strategies in ways. And so for where I'm at, it's to serve the needs of patients.
Yeah.
And so that's what the leader's doing. It's really not us, an individual over others. It's us together, and I'm the nurturer of these values and the mission forward.
You're talking kind of from a leadership position right now, this idea of moving forward together, the connecting of the values and the mission and the improvement and the growth that can take place. Shift a little bit with me, if you would. As you work with folks in your trainings, how do you help them identify and develop their own personal leadership style?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, each of us who becomes leaders has basically, oftentimes, because of expertise, it's our ability to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, medicine, whether you're a nursing leader, an administrative leader, a physician leader, and certainly outside of medicine, the same thing, you find individuals who are able to get things done. And then it's those individuals who are often given the formal titles. And so there's that common phrase, what got you here won't get you there. And so that expertise is quite helpful. But then once you start leading groups of individuals, you really have to be putting down your expertise. You really need to be seeing things in different ways. I love this metaphor, and this is all part of talking to leaders of how to conceptualize their role, is that we each have this perspective, and this comes from Ron Heifetz out of Harvard. I love the metaphor of it's dance floor on the balcony. And so each of us, as we're experiencing our lives, we're interacting with colleagues, and we have this experience of what they're saying and how we might respond. We hear kind of the music of the situation, and we have the dance. And in the moments, it can be very reflexive and automatic. But how helpful it can be for us to be able to find some time, some moments where we can stand up on the balcony and start to see things from different perspective outside of our reflexive kind of expertise in those moments, and start to put things together in different ways, start to see maybe different parts of the dance floor that we weren't aware of or hadn't acknowledged at the moment. I think a lot of leadership is being able to take yourself, to take your colleagues up to the balcony and start to see situations from that perspective, not just from this isolated, I'm the expert and this is what we've done and this is what we should do. But as we're on the balcony, we're seeing all these different things that are going on, all the agreements again and disagreements. How do we put this stuff together to move forward? So step number one of leadership is putting down your expertise, realizing that actually the feature for you is trying to not know the answer, but you're trying to help find and discover the answer. Those who know the answer know their answer. from behind their blind spots, and that leadership doesn't tend to be as acceptable and in very highly kind of fluid dynamics.
It's really good. There's a guy named Watzlawick that wrote a book called Change. It's one of the earliest books I read in my career, way back in class. And he talks about very much what you're talking about. Again, this meta view, standing outside and being able to look in, that the view from the balcony where we step outside and we see things in kind of a larger, more maybe appreciative perspective of all that's going on, and putting down that leadership role, just a kind of not leadership, but maybe I think that authority position, allowing things to be seen from the inside and then working from there, from that meta perspective.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that is the key thing, really. And as we're talking about the kind of these meta moments,
yes,
it's the ability to understand. And I love this, the concept of there's the stimulus and the response, the emotions that arise in the moment, and our ability to separate that initial kind of emotion and how we're feeling things from our response. And in that space, being able to think about things in different perspectives. And a leader is doing that both themselves and with colleagues. They're able to say, okay, reflexively, this is what I would do, but let me just for a moment, and it could be seconds, think about other perspectives, and that helps you move forward in more effective ways.
I think in the field of psychology, we work with what we call, kind of our secondary conscious and primary conscious. Those things are aware of us. And what you're talking about here, I think in an analogous way, is you're talking, and this is what Watzlawick talks about as well, of there's kind of the primary change or the secondary change. We can work within, or we can be on the outside looking in to where things can fundamentally shift, I think, in some very, very meaningful ways. And I love this view. The leaders you work with today, what are some of the challenges that leaders are experiencing today that you work with and help them kind of work through? What are the biggest challenges?
So I think again, there's individual challenges ourselves. We have our own fears and worries, our own kind of expertise, the things, our own blind spots. That's one thing. As we're meeting with colleagues, understanding all the various parts of them that they're bringing to the equation, and approaching them from that perspective of them having their own blind spots, fears, and worries, and how to work forward with that. And I think a big way this also comes forward is a challenging thing is you have groups of individuals now, which are all individuals with their own blind spots, their own fears or worries. They're all coming together. And how do you come together? And as we're dealing with issues, how are we making decisions? I think it's helpful for leaders. I love frameworks and structures and metaphors and those sorts of things. And there's a framework by David Snowden called the Cynefin framework. It's CYNEFIN, which is very, very helpful for me. And so sometimes when we come together, the decisions are clear. Anyone in the room would know, and those are easy situations. Then there's decisions that are complicated where it requires an expert. And so if you were to get 4 different emergency physicians taking care of a patient with shortness of breath, we would all agree that the patient has shortness of breath, their oxygen levels are low. Our goal is to improve that. We may have 4 different ways of helping to improve that patient's state. Some of us may order some test, others not. Sure. And so, but within this expertise, we agree on the inputs, we agree on the outcomes, but there's some kind of science in there that gets things to the final outcome. And so this is the easy stuff on this side. You can ask an expert, or everyone knows. What oftentimes happens is leaders are dealing with situations that are not clear, that are not complicated, but they're actually quite complex. And, we can take COVID recently as a very complex situation. Things are arising and kind of coming and going. The variables that we're going to consider, we don't agree upon. If you get a bunch of people in the room, even what should we be talking about? It's hard to even know where to start. What are the possible outcomes? It's hard to even know. And we can put COVID aside, talking about scheduling, talking about what time you open, your location and close, who you're hiring and firing, what your market strategy. These are all really complex issues. Yeah. And so, but oftentimes as we're getting in rooms, as we're leading, we're running meetings, getting people together, and you'll find we'll be talking about topics, and some people think that things are clear, and we all just know, I don't know, we have best practices. Why are we even talking about this?
Right.
Others are like, I've already taken care of this. I know I'm the expert. Let me just tell you what to do. Right. And then others are like, this is complex. And so a difficulty for leaders is within that confusion, helping people to come together and understand that actually, this is a really complex thing and we need to be opening up perspectives.
Yeah, I think to open up those perspectives, and you've used about 3 times in just what you were just saying right here, this idea of blind spots. It takes a certain level of humbleness and vulnerability, doesn't it, to kind of go into these areas. And a lot of times, given our own fears around vulnerability or being exposed, particularly, with sometimes higher degrees, we're afraid to kind of go there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you nudge people to take a look at whether it's individually or maybe kind of whether it's kind of a group think, blind spots?
Yeah.
How do you nudge people into that greater self-awareness?
It's funny because I'll go in, organizations will say, hey, can you come and help us out? And I'll go in and I'll meet them. And one of the first things oftentimes the leaders will say is, whatever you do, don't mention this. Because it's like that, this is the thing that we don't want to mention that, because if we mention it, it's like Voldemort. Don't mention Voldemort, because then and so we get in these sorts of situations. But those are I'm thinking, okay, that's what I'm going to mention. That's one of the first things I'm going to mention. When we're moving forward in these really challenging situations, I think we just need to deliberately ask, what are our fears and our worries?
There we go.
And each of us individually have them. And as groups, we have them. Our fear that we're going to waste our time, our fear that there's just so many fires that we need to stomp out, our fear that we're going to be exposed as not being good leaders, or that we're going to be exposed as being incorrect, our fear that we're going to, just so many fears and worries that we all have. And so unless you're explicitly bringing those things forward, calling them forward, these are the fears they're the monsters that are going to be living in the dark, that are going to be,
and they're going to be controlling everything. Yeah. And they're going to be controlling everything, aren't they? Yeah. What I like you're saying right here is that maybe the good leader is able to have this great holding capacity, in a non-judgmental, encouraging way to be able to maybe almost name the fears and the worries and the Voldemorts that we dare not name or mention, those things that we are believed, and mostly because we don't mention those things, given our fear of, if we mention them, we're going to open the floodgates, and now we're going to be overwhelmed by, and we're going to have to deal with, and it's above our pay grade, emotionally or otherwise, or as a group. And what you're saying is, what if we as leaders come in and name some of those fears and worries and normalize them, universalize them, and encourage folks to lean in with the leader's direction and holding, and to make it okay, and to watch how groups can work through those difficult times. I love that encouragement.
Yeah, and as you're coming together around these really complex issues, and each of the individuals has different perspectives, and there's agreements and disagreements, and you're deciding how to move forward, you can put those fears and worries in your vision. You can identify how you'd like to decrease the chance of those fears from occurring. And so if the fear is that as we move forward, this is actually going to hurt our ability to work together as a team, your vision will be to also preserve teamwork or to improve autonomy. And so you're going to go towards the positive and away from those sorts of fears. If you're deliberately suggesting those ahead of time, then I think it helps the team as you're moving forward and deciding which things you're going to be doing to kind of decrease the chance of those fears and worries from occurring. So it very much gives you almost the energy for the movement forward, because the energy to move forward is to try to avoid those fears. And so you're leveraging both the positive future and running away from the negative potential.
That is profound. That's very, very well said. I really like that. Those fears can lead down this path. We're talking today about, as we talk about being a good leader and the things that they can do. You also talk about the importance of, from the leadership position, it allows one to recognize and work towards reducing burnout and also emphasizing well-being. Weave that part in to the leadership's role.
Yeah. So I think there's a few ways of thinking about this. And I think it's either, if burnout often talks about, it's like us against the world. And oftentimes if you go on social media, it'll be individuals complaining about how they're burned out because of this other individual, because of this organization. Because of whoever the political leader is, because of the lawyers, because of, there's all that, and it's not so helpful. It's like you have no efficacy in that sort of space. It's kind of
like that external locus of control. I'm only as good as my circumstances around me,
perfectly said.
Yeah,
perfectly said. And so I think what we all want to be doing is finding our internal locus of control, our own efficacy, and not give it up. And so, yes, like this is happening to us, and yes, there are those variables that are hurting us. That's only part of the story. And so from an organizational perspective, I think of 3 different levels. And so one is the level of the organization. And so is the organization seeing burnout and the well-being of the individuals working there as being important? Do they agree that it is actually an organizational kind of systemic issue? And are they measuring it? In the emergency department, we measure vital signs. I would never see a patient without knowing the vital signs. In an organization, one of the vital signs is, the revenue, the cost, the quality, but it's also really the burnout and well-being of those who are working there. So if we're not measuring that, long-standing, it's not gonna do well as an organization.
Yeah.
So that organizational level, I think then that's also how we're working together. And so it's how we're running meetings, and whether as a leader, I'm running meetings, and the meetings are all leadings, really like report outs, where I'm telling people what's going on, and really not getting input, and people are not working well together. You're not really getting the best out of you. And then finally is the individual level. And on the individual level, there are things like, are you sleeping and eating well and meditating and exercising? Very important. I know I'm crusty. If I'm working a few nights of ED in the row, emergency department in the row, and I'm not exercising, I haven't eaten well, I'm crusty. And so it's going to be, my chance of becoming burned out is higher. And so that is part of it. Another part of it, though, is the way we're making sense of our situation, and the way we're making sense of the world, which is also enmeshed with our own fears and worries about our situation, about not being heard, about losing control, and our own blind spots. And so we need to challenge all these sorts of levels. I'll leave it there, and then we can get more into so what does an individual leader do in those sorts of situations?
Segue into that for us.
Yeah, so one of the things I like to do, so we have new physicians and scientists who, as we hire here at Mayo Clinic, I give a talk to them, and as part of their kind of orientation. And one of the questions I'll ask is name the 12 cranial nerves. They can all name them. Name the components, like metabolic components, and they can all name them. And then so name the components of well-being. And no one can name them. We don't know. And let's admit that there's some argument even amongst well-being experts about what the true definition of well-being is. And I'm not talking hedonic well-being, which is, I just went out last night, had a drink, felt really good this morning. I don't feel so good. That kind of well-being comes and goes. I'm talking about eudaimonic or psychological well-being. And so there are frameworks, I think, that are essential for us and leaders to understand. And so for me, Carol Riff out of the University of Wisconsin put together this eudaimonic well-being framework, and I put it into, because I'm a physician, into a mnemonic that I call pagers. And so P is purpose, and so the sense that we're aligned with the purpose of the organization, of those that we're working with, the values, and that our missions are aligned. When those are out of alignment, we're at risk, I think, of being burned out. A in pagers is autonomy, and autonomy isn't I don't care what you say, I do what I want. That's not autonomy. Autonomy is a sense that we're being heard, that we have a voice. It may be the group moves in a different direction than we would have moved, but we feel that we're being heard and that we've had some impact there.
There's value in that.
And then G is growth. So personal growth, the sense that we're getting better as we're moving along in life, better today than we were yesterday. And we have things that we're looking forward to and growing and learning as individuals. And then E is environmental mastery. And that's really centered around the resources that we need to get things done. And so do we have the resources? And the resources may be limited, but are we doing what's possible to gain those resources, acknowledging when they're not there and finding ways around that? And then R is positive relations. And because it stinks to work with people when it's negative, right? You want positive relations. And so how do we run meetings and create things and that encourage that? And then the final one, it goes back to ourselves, which is S is self-acceptance. And as I'm coaching leaders at all levels, the highest levels on down, our ability to accept that we are fallible, that we make mistakes. And in healthcare, this can be a huge thing. I mean, patients can die. And as we have these experiences where we see there may be some things that we could have done better, are we able to accept that we would move forward in different ways? If we're not self-accepting, it's going to hurt our sense of well-being, and I think start to push us towards burnout.
That's really good.
So now as a leader, you have I think these two framework, two ideas. One is there's three different levels. There's the systemic, there's the individual, and then there's the interpersonal kind of dynamic. And then you have the pagers of well-being. And if there's autonomy issues, you need to solve it at the systemic kind of organizational level. You need to solve it at the inter-individual level, and then you need to yourself kind of figure out how you can attain autonomy. And leaders can look at it from that perspective and help to encourage that.
I really, really appreciate that. That allows you to not just identify these things kind of in the pager reference, but then in each of those 3 levels, see where is this taking place, and being conscious and aware of that allows us to know the entry points, maybe some ways through that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research actually coming out of Mayo Clinic about burnout, really that's quantifying it, and we're still very much like, if 10 years ago, if I were to ask people how many of you were burned out, like no one would raise their hand, and now everyone raises their hand. It is a language that we're developing ourselves, that we're trying to figure out how to get through this and work towards well-being. And so none of us know the answers, but we're seeking them right now, and to develop the language to do that is important. There's research that comes out that shows how important leadership is in the burnout and well-being of their colleagues, and and things like, are you having discussions with individuals around personal growth? Are you having conversations where you're teaching them about what's going on inside and outside the department? Are they feeling like they have autonomy? Those sorts of things, as you go down the different questions they have. And I'm thinking of one study in particular, it showed that for every 1 point change, it was a 7% decrease or increase in burnout, dependent upon what the leader was doing. And so the leader is definitely a part. And I like to think of things as not formal leaders. I'm also thinking about leaders at all levels, which is really each of us have informal impacts on our colleagues. And so it's a nice recipe for just thinking about burnout and well-being.
I like that idea of each of us has some leadership in our lives. We kind of coming in this next question, holding that just for a second and seeing if we can blend it in. What if someone wants to be a really loyal and hardworking follower, instead of what we might think is the proverbial leader that we're talking about? What would you say to them about their role in this type of leader-follower dynamic?
Yeah. I'm going to come back from maybe a couple of perspectives. So first of all, I think of leaders as being individuals who develop leaders, not followers. And so hopefully you're working with someone who's trying to get the best out of you to find your kind of leadership abilities. Because being a follower is essential, like we're following the group, but yet is being a follower really finding the best out of yourself? And so I think you're wanting to be in a situation where you are growing, where you're feeling a sense of autonomy, and you're not just kind of, filling in the checkbox that the boss has created.
Yes.
Some people may enjoy that, and for some people, work is just a small component of what they're doing, and work is there to get the salary to pay for what's actually provides them personal growth outside.
But it sounds like you're emphasizing, though, that even within maybe even that way of setting it up in their minds, there's still some opportunity for people to get a more purposeful, meaningful sense of themselves if they can understand they can contribute some things and actually be growing even in that dynamic.
Yeah, I think we need to be, as humans, like searching for those environments. I think so we have a garden in our backyard, and we throw a bunch of seeds down, and some grow and some don't grow. And it's the soil, the sun, the rain, all those sorts. There's some of the seeds. We are not, as humans, seeds like fixed to a specific garden. We have legs. And so if we're in a situation that is not working for us, we need to walk to the different garden. And so I think follower, you don't want to be just trapped to this garden where you're not getting nourished, where it's not the best for you. So I think even as you're following, I think you're thinking about, is this the best place for me? And it's difficult because we have, in this place where we grew up, or, we have this mortgage, or there's family. There's a lot of things that compete for our time and attention. And that may hold us to environments that may be less helpful for us. But I think it's important to find, as you're talking about, your locus of control, where we have efficacy, and in these kind of leader to colleague relationships, finding how we're being able to be our best in those situations.
That's a great encouragement. Peter, I'm going to pause right here just for a second. Here, Richard, we're going to be starting to kind of bring it home a little bit now. I'm going to ask you to give a final message, and we're going to kind of go into the resources. Is there anything else that you would like me to tee up in terms of a question of what you would like our listeners to take away that you'd like to add to today?
I mean, we could talk about like, I think about the leader as wearing 5 hats, and that's coach, supervisor, and sponsor. We could go on, like, start talking about that.
So it looks like the 5 hats of leadership. Is that what you're saying there? Forgive me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Let me tee that up. I appreciate that very much. So, Richard, if we're talking about various, maybe some leadership styles, how do you think about some of these personas that people can take in terms of leadership?
Yeah. So, we talked about how I think leaders are really working with colleagues. And I think the climate, I'm going to talk about hats now. The hats, the leaders wears kind of various hats. And I think of 5 different hats. The climate is that it's positive, forward looking. We're trying to get the best out of each other. And we're really viewing things as our individuals that we're working with as colleagues. But I think the 5 hats is being, so one is coach, and one is mentor, one is teacher, one is supervisor, and sponsor. And so I think commonly people think about leaders as being kind of the mentor and the supervisor.
Right.
And so we'll talk about supervisor. The supervisor is the one who hires and fires, keeps things in line, and very essential. So every leader is going to have some supervisory responsibility that they're flexing at times. And then there's mentorship. And this is one of these things where when you're mentoring colleagues, they come to you because you've been there and you've done that. You have subject matter expertise, and they want to hear what you think.
Yeah.
And as you're mentoring, you're helping your colleagues see things through your eyes.
Right.
And so people come to you so you can say, I hear what you're saying. And if I were you, this is what I would do. Or given the situation, I would suggest you do that. That's a mentoring relationship. That was my dog walking out of the door.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
German Shepherd, unsure.
I love it. I love it. That's good.
Can you give me 1 second? I just want to actually block the door. So she's not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We had our first snow this morning.
Where are you at? Oh,
Minnesota.
You're up in Minnesota. That's right.
Yeah.
Mayo Clinic. That's right.
Yeah.
So we were just on mentorship and seeing things through the person's eyes and giving from the content perspective or content expert perspective, just kind of helping them kind of fill in some things.
Yeah. So I think for leaders, it's we tend again classically think of leaders as individuals who are supervisors and mentors. You're there and you're kind of pointing what should be happening based on my experience. I think we should do this. You're flexing your expertise. Important hats, they need to be worn. Let's put those aside now.
Okay.
And so then there's the head of teacher. And so teacher is really, as colleagues come to you, and as you're meeting with groups of colleagues, you have the opportunity to see what's happening both within your kind of work group and then outside your work group. You're having meetings with individuals on the outside, and to be able to teach about things that are happening, help individuals gain new skills. That's very important for a leader to be doing. And so teaching, I think, a major hat that they're wearing. I want to differentiate coach from mentor. So I was talking about mentor as being someone who helps you see things through their own eyes. A coach is someone who's going to help you see things through your own eyes.
Got it.
Right. And so as a leader, not leading with your expertise, but actually as someone's coming to you, viewing them as the expert of their life, of their situation, of their position. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be asking questions that are going to be prompting them to gain insight and see parts of the dance floor in better ways. And it's almost like remember the old computers, like the old Windows computer, and you'd open up Windows and the ball would start spinning, and then you started adding RAM and they can start processing more. I think as good leaders, when we're coaches, we're able to hold lots of information and then put it together and present it back to our colleague in a way that they can think through things more efficiently. And so
there's really an art to that, isn't there?
Yeah. On the one hand, I hear you saying this. On the other hand, I hear you saying that. So how would you like to move forward? As opposed to the mentor, which is saying, this is how I would move forward.
Gotcha.
This is creating leaders as opposed to followers.
Yes.
And so then, the final hat there is going to be sponsor. And so many individuals have good mentors, but are there individuals who are willing to kind of put themselves out there, expend their own social capital to help others advance? And we've seen, particularly for minorities and women, may have mentorship, but not a lot of sponsors. And so how can we use our own social capital to be able to say, hey, I don't know if you thought about this individual, but they would be really wonderful for this role. I would suggest you consider them.
Really good.
And so while you're putting yourself on the line there, you're actually advancing someone else.
I really
The
like
best
that
leaders
piece. Mm-hmm.
in and out of those hats, in any even given conversation, you may be supervisor, you may be coach and teach and go back to coach. It is that dynamic kind of conversation that I think helps teams and individuals.
That's excellent. I really like that last piece too. We had on our show recently some discussion around privilege, and I think in that reference, it's kind of a very heated issue right now. But in our discussion with our guest, we're talking about how in positions, let's name it as privilege, you have opportunities to be your best self, to morally have an opportunity to almost what you're describing right here as the last one, sponsor, to create opportunities for this, and using social capital for the best of its opportunity for others to reach all the things you're talking about, whether they be you're coaching them or mentoring them or teaching or supervising, being able to bring in this social capital and that encouragement, putting yourself on the line.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. To further opportunities for them to further themselves with the potential that they have to realize. So that last piece really sticks with me too. That's good. Hey, Richard, we're kind of winding down for today, but if you would leave us with a final message, what might you encourage our listeners to consider for themselves in their current leadership positions, or those that are wanting to grow into leadership positions? What do you want them to be left with from today?
I think one of the things it is difficult to be a leader. It's difficult and oftentimes isolating. You find yourself in a position where you're trying to reconcile the agreements and disagreements of colleagues and who are friends in many cases, and it can be quite difficult. Yeah. I think that it's important for each of us as leaders to identify that actually these are times of tremendous growth for us. Those times when we're feeling so uncomfortable. It's often those are the times when our own fears and worries are rising the most. And those are the times where we can, I think, meet with colleagues, individuals who are positive in our lives, whether they be mentors or coaches, and try to kind of work our way through those sorts of things. Because in that space is where we become better leaders. In that space, we're able to better handle complexity and to help others as we move forward. Yeah, and I feel for individuals who are in that, because we've all been there. The walks in the rain with the bad movie montage and the sad music. It happens.
Right. What I like, though, is you're talking about if we're going to be in that space, which as leaders, we're going to be in that space, period.
Yeah.
How we can best be in that space and how we can be our best selves and move things forward in that space. So you're kind of reframing that space can be something that's challenging and bring up our worst fears and nightmares, or it can be a humbling and it can be a vulnerable place where there can be some confidence if we kind of navigate through it in some of the ways you're encouraging us to do today. I really like that. It's good. Hey, we would love folks that are listening today to be able to connect with you, to find out more about your work and also your book, You're the Leader, Now What? Give us some resources that folks can follow up with.
Yeah. So I have a website, richardwinters.com. So my name. Nice. I'm on Twitter at Dr. R. Winters, and I'm on LinkedIn as Richard C. Winters.
Wonderful.
Very creative there. I was very
hey, I like simple. Let's keep it simple, stupid. I love the KISS. That's right. That's good. Hey, Richard, sure appreciate you being with us today and all your sharing. It's been a joy to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Nice to be here with you. Hey, I also want to thank you, our listeners, for joining Richard and me today. It's always great to have you with us as well. Regarding our episode today, I want to thank you and remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. So if you would check out our webpage, triadhq.com/BHT, and explore our archive of podcasts and resource materials. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.